No one in the crowd could believe what they were seeing: two uniformed police officers twisting the arms of a royal guard, forcing him face-first against a patrol car, cold steel handcuffs snapping shut on his wrists, and yet, just 15 seconds later, the impossible happened. Before I take you into the heart of this unbelievable true story, let me tell you, life has a strange way of testing the strongest among us. Sometimes, the ones you underestimate the most are the ones who rise higher than anyone imagined. If you believe in courage, honor, and the will to never back down, make sure you subscribe so you never miss stories that remind you what the human spirit is truly capable of. It was late afternoon in the heart of London. The winter air was sharp, the kind that cut through even the thickest coats. The sky was an overcast gray, and the sound of tourists chattering in dozens of languages floated through the air outside Buckingham Palace. Standing in his iconic red tunic and bearskin hat was Royal Guard Sergeant Daniel Hayes, a man who had worn the uniform for over 2 decades. His eyes, sharp as an eagle's, scanned the area, not because he expected trouble, but because the Royal Guard never lets their vigilance slip. Daniel wasn't just any guard. Before joining the Royal Household Division, he had served as a Special Forces operator, completing missions so classified that even his own family knew nothing. But to the crowd, he was simply another stoic figure in a uniform, unmoving, almost statue-like. 2 police officers, both visibly irritated and tense, were weaving through the crowd toward Daniel. They weren't the usual palace security, these were Metropolitan Police patrolmen, their radios crackling. A man in the crowd had apparently complained that Daniel had shoved him while adjusting his post, a complete fabrication. The truth was, Daniel had merely stepped forward to make space during the ceremonial march, and the man had stumbled back. But that wasn't how the story reached the officers. "Step away from your position now," one of them ordered. Daniel didn't move. By law and by duty, he could not abandon his post without authorization from his commanding officer. "I can't," Daniel replied evenly. "You'll have to speak to my commander." The younger officer, a tall man with a smirk that hinted at arrogance, stepped closer. "Mate, you don't make the rules. We do." The second officer, broader, older, and clearly the more aggressive one, moved behind Daniel. "We've had enough of this stand-still act. Turn around." In front of dozens of onlookers, and several cameras, the 2 officers grabbed the Royal Guard by his arms. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "You can't do this," a woman's voice rang out, but the officers ignored her. With sudden force, they twisted Daniel's arms behind his back and clicked the handcuffs tight. The steel bit into his wrists. For a brief second, the world slowed. Daniel's breathing was calm. His eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in calculation. One of the officers leaned in, whispering mockingly, "Let's see you stand still now." Years earlier, in the harsh Afghan mountains, Daniel had been captured during a mission. His wrists were bound with cable ties, his captors certain no one could escape. But Daniel had, in less than 20 seconds. It was a skill drilled into him during Special Forces training: escape and evasion. The principle was simple: no restraint is unbreakable if you know its weak points. Handcuffs? They had a flaw too, and Daniel knew it better than anyone. Now, back in the present, Daniel stood with his hands cuffed behind him. The officers began to walk him toward their patrol car. But just a few steps in, something changed. Daniel's posture shifted. His shoulders rolled subtly, and his wrists angled in a way only an expert would notice. A faint click. Then another. The cuffs snapped open. Gasps erupted from the crowd as Daniel, in full view of the public and the stunned officers, broke free. It had taken exactly 15 seconds. "What the?" The younger officer froze, his mouth hanging open. The older one reached for his taser, but Daniel didn't flinch. "I'm not resisting," Daniel said, his voice calm yet carrying a weight that silenced everyone around. "But I will not be unlawfully removed from my post." From the edge of the crowd, someone was filming a video that, within hours, would ignite the internet. Suddenly, the sound of heavy boots echoed from the far end of the courtyard. A group of high-ranking Royal Guard officers were approaching, led by the regimental adjutant. His face was unreadable, his eyes locked on the scene unfolding before him. The crowd parted as they arrived. "What's going on here?" the adjutant demanded. The two police officers immediately began talking over each other, blaming Daniel for non-compliance and aggression. Daniel stood silently, his eyes fixed straight ahead. The adjutant looked at the opened cuffs still dangling from one wrist. His expression changed ever so slightly. Was it recognition? Respect? And then, he turned to the police. The regimental adjutant's gaze swept over the scene, the shocked faces of tourists, the opened handcuffs hanging loosely from Sergeant Daniel Hayes' wrist, and the two Metropolitan Police officers shifting uncomfortably under the weight of his silence. Finally, he spoke. "Remove your hands from my guard. Now." The younger officer frowned. "Sir, with all due respect, this man assaulted a civilian." The adjutant cut him off, his voice sharp enough to slice through the winter air. "I have 27 years of service, and I can read a man before he even opens his mouth. That man," he pointed to Daniel, "would sooner lay down his life than harm an innocent. I want your badge numbers." Now, whispers turned into open shouts from the crowd. "Leave him alone. He's protecting the palace. You're the ones in the wrong." Phones were raised higher, filming every second. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. In that moment, they realized the tide of public opinion had shifted entirely against them. Daniel, however, remained motionless, his gaze fixed straight ahead. He wasn't seeking revenge. He wasn't even seeking an apology. All he wanted was to uphold his duty without interference. The adjutant stepped closer to Daniel, speaking quietly so only he could hear. "You're clear, Sergeant. Resume your post." With a subtle nod, Daniel adjusted his stance, squared his shoulders, and returned to the precise, immovable position of a royal guard, as though nothing had happened. The opened cuffs clinked softly against his wrist before he handed them back to the older officer. The symbolism was undeniable, a man who could be bound, but never broken. Knowing they had lost control of the situation, the officers muttered something about misunderstanding and retreated toward their car, the crowd booing in their wake. But the story was far from over. By that evening, the video had exploded online. It was everywhere: news channels, social media feeds, even international broadcasts. The footage showed not just the moment Daniel freed himself from the cuffs, but the stoic dignity with which he handled the confrontation. Comments flooded in. "That's not just strength, that's discipline. This is why you never underestimate quiet men. 15 seconds of pure mastery." 2 days later, Daniel was summoned to a private meeting at the palace. Expecting a formal debrief, he was surprised to be greeted by a senior official from the royal household. "You've brought a great deal of attention to the guard," the official said. "Not through words, but through your actions. The king himself asked that I thank you for upholding your duty with such composure." Daniel felt a quiet pride swell in his chest, not for the recognition, but for the fact that his training and values had held true under pressure. That night, sitting alone at his small kitchen table, Daniel thought back to the years that had shaped him. The grueling training. The moments of doubt. The times he'd been underestimated because he wasn't the loudest man in the room. He realized something powerful: it's not the noise you make that defines you, it's the strength you show when tested. A week later, a letter arrived at Daniel's home. It was from the very man who had accused him of assault. The words inside were shaky, but sincere. "I misjudged you. I thought you were just a stiff soldier standing for show. But after seeing what happened, I understand now, you're the reason we feel safe. I'm sorry." Daniel folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not because he needed the apology, but because it was proof that dignity and restraint could change hearts. Life will put you in situations where people will doubt you, accuse you, and even try to break you. They may put chains on your hands, limits on your potential, and walls around your dreams. But just like Sergeant Daniel Hayes, you must remember, no chain is stronger than your will to be free. The true strength of a person is not in overpowering others, but in standing firm, calm, and unshaken in the face of injustice. And so, the man who could not move from his post, moved the world instead. Because sometimes, all it takes to inspire millions is 15 seconds of quiet, unshakable courage. If this story inspired you, then take a moment. Hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more true stories of resilience and honor. Your support helps keep these powerful stories alive.